may be the greatest catch I've ever seen in my life.
Okay, my dudes, this is something we did a few weeks ago where we went through and we filtered through all the crap because we know that, yes, there are going to be some useful pieces of news when you're going through and having all these players back at practice. When you have all these guys together, when you have the beat reporters covering them, there are going to be useful tidbits for us to take through. And if you're playing Dynasty, if you're playing Redraft, if you're playing Best Ball, it doesn't matter. You need to be changing some of your draft strategy and making small tweaks within your player tiers based on some of this news coming out. With that being said, a lot of this news is complete crap. A lot of this news is just, hey, I'm a beat reporter. I really need to make sure that I'm getting more Twitter followers so we can go through and get either a pay raise, get a better gig, whatever we need 2 to 3 years from now. So let's put out a piece that we know is going to get some traction. Let's put out something that we know is going to get some retweets. So we are going to be going through and we are going to be looking at all the fantasy football news that we've had within the last week. And I'm going to be trying to filter it out. I'm going to be trying to say, this is useful. This should make an impact on our dynasty draft strategy or redraft draft strategy or best ball. Doesn't really matter. And also we are going to be going, this is horrible. This is just crap news. If this changes a price of a player at all, that's how you know that that player may be just an overhyped guy that we're avoiding in fantasy drafts. But of course, before we get into it, go down there, drop a like, leave a comment, subscribe to the channel. And I need to make the announcement. We are closing in on 400 flock supporters over there on Patreon, where we are doing extra daily podcasts every single day, where I'm breaking down all of your fantasy teams in those podcasts. We have our Dynasty Rookie Draft Guide over there. We are going to have our 2021 Fantasy Football Draft Guide there as well. I mean, pretty much everything's happening there, but 400 is a massive number because we have that milestone. When we hit that 400 mark on Patreon, we are going through creating a $500 fantasy league that I am paying for one of the teams for someone to play in. We are doing it as a giveaway for someone over there on Patreon. Of course, all the other spots will be given to Patreon flock members as well. But yeah, that should be it. Let's dive into this video. The first piece of news we have is Rashad Penny is not practicing. Now, this is because you actually have a small cleanup in Rashad Penny's knee where he tore that ACL, where he tore that meniscus. I mean, that was a nasty knee injury that he suffered 2 years ago. And I will say, this is coming from someone who loves Rashad Penny. This is coming from someone who has called Rashad Penny a premium handcuff running back that I'm targeting in the majority of my fantasy drafts where we do not go with Chris Carson. But this is news. This is not something to completely gloss over, because what you have here with Rashad Penny is you have that player that suffered that significant injury. And I know a lot of people may be saying, but Mason, we are so far out from the season. How does this matter at all? He's going to be 100% ready by then. Well, what I'm saying here with Rashad Penny is based on the recent investment that you've had from the Seattle Seahawks, both into Travis Homer and DJ Dallas. I don't think Rashad Penny is a lock to be the number 2 running back on this depth chart. Now, I think that he is easily the most talented running back outside of Chris Carson. At one point, I would have made the argument that he was more talented than Chris Carson, but it looks like I lost that argument years ago. But here with Rashad Penny, you need him out there. You need him on the field during camps, during OTAs. That way he can solidify himself as the backup to Chris Carson. That way, if you do see a Carson injury in all these teams that we are drafting Rashad Penny on, going, please God, please give him a feature down role if Chris Carson goes down. If he's not practicing right now and not cementing that role in, what you're probably going to find is hey, a Chris Carson injury happens, and all of a sudden, yeah, Rashad Penny has a role on this team. But at the same time, Travis Homer is running routes out of the backfield because we know Travis Homer can be a more than capable receiving running back. And all of a sudden, Rashad Penny, someone that we thought could have been a 3-down guy going into the season in the case of a Chris Carson injury, just simply doesn't have that role on lock. So yeah, it's never good news if a player is not practicing at this time, especially if it's someone that we don't have that solidified role in, whether it's the first guy on the depth chart, second guy on the depth chart, it doesn't matter. Here with Rashad Penny, I'm just going to have to say, this is a player that I love, but this is bad news. This should not necessarily make him free fall down fantasy draft boards, but if you were sitting there at the end of the draft and you were trying to make a tiebreaker between Rashad Penny and player X, I think this makes Rashad Penny a little less attractive. Okay, So now let's go over to the other side of the spectrum. Let's talk about some news that doesn't matter at all. And this is Robbie Anderson coming out and saying something's different with Sam Darnold. When Sam Darnold walks into the building in Carolina, something's different about that man than when he was in New York. Now, I kind of laughed that this was getting circulated around fantasy football Twitter. What do y'all think is exactly different? And I'm not even saying that Sam Darnold is a bad value in drafts this year. I actually really like some of these Carolina Panthers pass catchers. So because of that, I'm really hoping that Sam Darnold is good. But I think this quote is just a hype piece. I mean, how is this notable? How is this impacting fantasy football analysis in the slightest? I mean, if you are listening to someone give you analysis and they use this in any form of backup, even if it's just a little tiny cherry on top of their main form of analysis, I mean, I think that I'm not listening to that at all, because this is meaningless. This is what you have. You have those wide receivers always hyping up the quarterbacks. I mean, just like we discussed in the last video, this is very similar to Tyler Boyd coming out and saying, hey, my hands are hurting after practice. Joe Burrow has that arm strength. No, guys, of course they're going to hype up the quarterback. That's their job. That's what they are going to do. But let's go to another piece of notable news. Let's go over to Chicago. And Matt Nagy comes out and says there's no possible scenario Justin Fields is the starting quarterback in week 1. Now, this, I don't want to say warms my heart, but as a Trey Lance truther, as someone that has been screaming into the wind that Trey Lance is the quarterback that you want to be drafting besides Trevor Lawrence, that Trey Lance is easily the quarterback 2 in Dynasty, that he is a massive value in redraft leagues right now, I think that it's so funny that everybody that is on the Justin Fields train has always made the argument that the reason you're drafting Justin Fields in redraft, in Dynasty, in whatever, is because he is going to be starting for the Chicago Bears significantly earlier than what you're finding with Trey Lance and the 49ers. And y'all know, if you watch the other Dynasty channel, when we went through and we did the historical research on when quarterbacks actually get to start their rookie season, a quarterback drafted within this top 3 picks, 90% of the time, out of the last 10 quarterbacks, 9 out of 10 of them were the starting quarterback for their NFL team by week 4. So if all of a sudden we have these reports coming out of Chicago saying, hey, Justin Fields 100% isn't starting week 1, that's Andy Dalton's job. Are we really confident that Justin Fields is going to be starting before Trey Lance? Because if you look at best ball drafts right now, if you look at redraft leagues, I mean, Justin Fields 9 times out of 10 is going ahead of Trey Lance. And I've already been on record saying that I would bet any amount of money that I have that if you're looking at points per game in games that they actually start for 2021, Trey Lance is going to be the better quarterback. But it's been a little bit of a hard time going all in and investing into him in those best ball formats, because we know in best ball, it is crucial to have your starting quarterback actually starting games so you can have more opportunities at capturing one of those spike weeks. So that's why I've been a little bit hesitant going all in on Trey Lance, because we're going, okay, if he isn't starting by week 4, I mean, this is going to be a bad draft pick. It doesn't matter what his points per game look like. But now, all of a sudden, Justin Fields may be in that same boat. Please, 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 if you're drafting Justin Fields rounds ahead of Trey Lance, reevaluate your process here. Because I think that making an argument for Fields over Lance at this point, when it looks like neither is going to be the starting quarterback at week 1, is getting a little tougher to do. Okay, so now another piece of notable news is Jamison Crowder renegotiated his contract. Obviously, he had no leverage here. He really had no guaranteed money. So a lot of people thought he was going to get cut, including myself, including someone that loves Elijah Moore. So y'all know Elijah Moore is my guy. We really liked him in the pre-draft process. But Jamison Crowder coming back for 2021. I don't want to say kills Elijah Moore, but it is very, very bad for Elijah Moore, because Moore and Crowder are supposed to play very similar roles. I mean, you're going to have Corey Davis on the outside. Regardless, Corey Davis is going to be that alpha X wide receiver. And most likely, given his speed, you're probably going to have Denzel Mims on the outside as well, stretching the field. And then you have both Elijah Moore and Jamison Crowder kind of sitting there like they are going to play the slot. But we can't say that for sure in the case of Elijah Moore. That's why I don't necessarily want to call him completely dead, because Elijah Moore also does have that elite speed. So maybe they look to use him a little bit more creatively. But regardless, this can't be a good thing for Elijah Moore. With Elijah Moore, you wanted him to see every single snap for the New York Jets. I would be surprised if he has that early season role, because Jamison Crowder was highly productive last year. Jamison Crowder looked like a good NFL wide receiver on a very bad team. So it doesn't matter that they go and pay Corey Davis. It doesn't matter that they draft a player like Elijah Moore. If they renegotiate this contract, you're naturally assuming that Jamison Crowder is going to be getting snaps. If he's going to be getting snaps, he's going to be getting targets, and that's going to lower the target share for Corey Davis, for Elijah Moore, for Denzel Mims, if you're holding out any hope on Denzel Mims. So yeah, I think that Jamison Crowder coming back is not good for anybody. It's not like you're getting excited to draft Jamison Crowder this upcoming season, and it makes you a whole lot less excited to draft Elijah Moore, Corey Davis, or even Denzel Mims. Maybe you make the argument that it's good for Zach Wilson, but I don't even really want to go that far. So yeah, Jamison Crowder coming back really hurts everybody in New York. Okay, so now let's go over and let's talk about Irv Smith Jr. So with Irv Smith Jr., y'all know that this is a player that I have liked for years now. I mean, coming out of that 2019 draft class, he was the clear tight end 3 behind TJ Hawkinson, behind Noah Fant. And this is a player that last offseason in Dynasty, I was investing into every chance I got. I mean, if you go through those Flock Patreon Dynasty leagues, you're going to find that Irv Smith Jr. is across all of those rosters. Now, in redraft leagues last year, we weren't really drafting him because you weren't necessarily expecting a breakout at 22 years old for a tight end that's also sharing the field with Kyle Rudolph. So not necessarily hurt too bad about him in redraft last year. But I thought this was the year with Irv Smith Jr. I mean, everything was lining up. You have him going into year 3, which is when you should expect those tight ends to begin to break out. And you also have Kyle Rudolph going over to New York. So I was so excited about Irv Smith Jr., but nonstop, the coach for the Minnesota Vikings coming out saying Irv Smith Jr.'s role won't grow in 2021. Irv Smith Jr., for whatever reason, is just getting every negative headline that you can find in Minnesota. And now I know that a lot of the times we say, hey, these hype pieces, they don't really mean anything if they're just opinionated, if they're just a wide receiver talking good about a quarterback, coach talking good about a wide receiver. We don't want to focus in too much on that. But the reason we don't want to focus in too much on that is because that's what happens every single time. I mean, you always have that quarterback coming out going, oh my God, T. Higgins, he's the best thing that's ever walked this earth. Of course, you're going to have those positive reports, but you never have negative reports coming out like this. I mean, this is very similar to what you had in San Francisco a few years ago with Dante Pettis. I mean, if y'all remember Dante Pettis, his rookie season, he had a decent year, to be completely honest. I mean, Dante Pettis, someone that I was not shying away from, and we learned our lesson here. I mean, with Dante Pettis, Kyle Shanahan nonstop came out and was just saying, hey, Dante Pettis, he's a bum. We don't want to use him. Literally, he's like the 5th wide receiver on this roster. And I was sitting there going, ha, ha, ha. Good job, Kyle Shanahan, trying to motivate our guy, Dante Pettis. And then you get to the season, he's not playing, and you're like, what is going on here? Were you being serious, Shanahan? Is this something that we should have listened to? And the answer is yes. When you have these negative reports, I think you have to pay attention. Obviously, you're not making this an undraftable player, but you have to be sliding him down slightly. So Irv Smith Jr., I mean, I think my excitement for him in 2021, I don't want to say he's getting killed, but it's definitely going to be tampered given the fact that this is giving me flashbacks back to Dante Pettis. So now our next headline is about 20 headlines that have come out in the past week of just everybody in Jacksonville going, Laviska Shenault, the best thing we have ever seen. Laviska Shenault, the next Julio Jones. And I don't want people to think that I don't like Laviska Shenault. I mean, y'all go and just go back on this channel to that year 2 breakout video. And I went through it before any of this hype was happening. And I was saying, hey, Laviska Shenault, a way, way, way better value in fantasy drafts than a Jerry Jeudy. I would rather have Viska straight up over Jeudy. I think he's one of the best value in fantasy drafts this year because he was going in rounds 10, 11, 12. Somehow we went through on our Dynasty channel before the NFL draft calling DJ Chark an overvalued player, saying we don't think that DJ Chark is the clear wide receiver 1 here. I think this is more of a wide receiver 1A, wide receiver 1B type situation. But I am now sitting here going, what is the price going to be on Laviska Shenault? Because I don't think these reports mean too much coming from someone who loves him. I would rather just follow the numbers and trust the prospect evaluation coming into the NFL and what we saw his rookie season. But if these reports continue to come out and Laviska Shenault jumps up to being a 7th round pick in redraft leagues, I think that's going to be a very tough pill for me to swallow. I mean, we are fine drafting Laviska Shenault at the discount price. I was aggressively targeting him. But I think these reports are a little bit meaningless. And now this is kind of a crappy thing when you're following fantasy football this closely. I mean, you find your guys that you really like. then their price rises up for a reason you don't necessarily agree with, and you go, okay, at this new price, do we still like them? At this new price, are we still going to be aggressively drafting them? And I simply don't have the answer for that yet. I think we have to wait 2 to 3 weeks to see where the ADP kind of lands with Laviska Shenault, just given the fact that this hype doesn't look like it's going to slow down anytime soon. But yeah, we will definitely keep y'all updated on that in the coming weeks. Now, this thing is going to be something I have no idea what's going on with. Okay, so this was a piece of news circulating. I don't understand it. Okay, here's the quote. People forget Marlon Mack was on pace for 1,792 yards. Okay, someone explain this to me. Is this either one of two things? One, this is someone who literally has no idea what's going on. He's probably a toddler saying this. Or B, it's just a meme. And I think it's probably just a meme because I don't think anybody in their right mind would try to take a 1-game sample and say that a player was on pace for this, because obviously that's something that a child would do. But I think it's a meme because you go to the comment section of pretty much all of these, and for some reason, everybody is spamming what about Marlon Mack. Now, I don't understand this. I'm not necessarily hip on the Twitter slogan. I spend way more time on Patreon than I do on Twitter. So please let me know if I am missing something here. Let me know what the meme thing is with Marlon Mack. You're going to have to comment below because I have no idea. Okay, so last video, we talked about how some people that produce fantasy football content will go through and they will take a piece of news, they'll run with it, make it a way bigger deal than it needs to be if it fits their narrative. And now I think we've all realized by now that everybody and their mom is calling DeAndre Swift an overvalued running back. And I've already given my opinion on this. I've already told y'all that one of the reasons you have every single fantasy football person coming out and saying the same piece of analysis the majority of the time, especially with it being an overvalued player, is when everybody hops on the same board, what they can do is they can steal each other's analysis. So they all kind of sound smart. I mean, if you have one person saying one smart thing, then you can get the seagulls behind them just chirping. And they're like, hey, that guy said something smart. Let me go repeat it over here. And also when they jump in and they're all chirping the same thing, if they're wrong, that player isn't necessarily overvalued, then all of a sudden, hey, it wasn't a big deal. I was wrong about player X, but so was everybody else over here. So nobody really wants to go out on a limb and talk about their own thing. So I really want to point this out with everybody just nonstop piling on with DeAndre Swift. You have Todd Gurley visiting the Lions a few weeks back, and everybody's like, oh, Todd Gurley's visiting. This is another reason you're avoiding DeAndre Swift, yada, yada, yada. Well, a week ago, Todd Gurley visited the Ravens, and you didn't hear a single peep about it. You did not hear a single peep about how this affects J.K. Dobbins, despite everybody and their mom thinking this was the biggest deal ever that we have seen for DeAndre Swift, despite the Baltimore Ravens going out, giving Gus Edwards a pretty damn big contract. So I'm sitting here going, yeah, I'm fine saying that Todd Gurley visiting the Ravens doesn't necessarily impact J.K. Dobbins at all, but I want to be consistent here. I just want to ask that for everybody else at the same time. If Todd Gurley visiting the Lions is the biggest deal we have ever seen, make it the same thing when he visits the Ravens. So pick a lane here. I mean, Todd Gurley visiting the Ravens, in my opinion, not necessarily a big deal at all, but still something I want to discuss. And yeah, I was going to talk about a few more news quotes that don't necessarily matter, but I think we kind of get the gist here of trying to decipher what matters and what doesn't. And also, this video is already running too long. So please, if y'all enjoyed it, go down there, drop a like, leave a comment, subscribe to the channel. And yeah, that should be it. I will see y'all with the video tomorrow.